Friends, I have something incredibly cool for you today. We're at the Estes-Winn Museum here in Asheville, North Carolina, and I got my new pal Heath here. He's going to give me an exclusive private tour of this place. Heath, tell me a little bit about this awesome museum.
Hey, thanks, Zach. We're glad you're here. I'm Heath Towson. I'm one of the docents at the Estes-Winn Antique Car Museum. We are a free museum that is open April 1st through December 31st. So we do close during the winter time. This is a museum that has over 60 years of history, and the majority of our cars have local Asheville connections to them. So this facility that we're in was referred to as Biltmore Industries for a long time, and it started as a fabric production facility that was weaving a product called Biltmore Homespun Woven Wool, and that was a beautiful high-end product for men and women's clothing. And it happened to go bankrupt in the early 50s and was purchased by a local gentleman named Harry Blomberg, who was a very enterprising businessman in Asheville. He owned several businesses called Harry's Motor Inns that were like a secure high-end parking garage and service facility. And he also had the Cadillac and Pontiac franchise. And he came up here looking just to buy a couple antiques for his lake house and ended up buying the entire Biltmore Industries business, revived the weaving on a small scale, and opened the Estes-Winn Car Museum in June of '66. So this summer, we'll be celebrating our 60th anniversary.
That is so awesome. So we're gonna tour this facility. There's a lot of early pre-war cars here. I'm so excited. So Heath, why don't we go tour this place?
Sounds good, Zach.
All righty. So tell me about this first car here.
So this is a 1927 LaSalle Phaeton. And that means that this is an open-air touring car, and it also does not have side curtains. So a Phaeton is usually like an open-air, can even have like a dual cowl where you have a second windshield for the passengers. And this is an original Asheville car. So this was sold brand new at the Western Carolina Auto Company on Market Street in downtown Asheville. And this was owned by a gentleman named John Lang, and his father was the owner of the Western Carolina Auto Company. And 1927 was also the first year of LaSalle. So this was intended to be a more affordable Cadillac. So this was a division of Cadillac. And this is one.
So this was not an independent company. This is General, or I guess it would have been before General Motors, but this was an American car.
This is part of General Motors, yeah. So it was a lower division of Cadillac. But this was still about $2,500 when it was brand new in 27, when a Model T would have been $500 or $600. So this was definitely a luxury car. This was ordered with a tri-tone paint job, so it has kind of a darker maroon, oxblood, and black. And then Mr. Lang sprung for the optional solid disc wheels, which are a $150 add-on. And this would be like a solid steel wheel when many other cars were running like a wood spoke or a wire wheel. So this car was found by Harry, the founder of our museum, in the basement of an old hotel in downtown Asheville that was being demolished in 1964, called the Landgren Hotel.
So it was just sitting in the basement?
It was sitting in the basement. They had an access, there was like a garage door off an alleyway that gave access to the basement, so they were able to get it out. But this car and another car were found there, and Harry did kind of more of a preservation, which is the theme with a lot of our cars. So the interior and the convertible top are restored, but we believe the paint to be all original. So this, a lot of this goes back to probably 64, 65. And he had a right-hand man at the dealer named Bob Allen that was a salesman. And Bob's brother-in-law was a guy named Joe Liner. And he did a lot of the work. He redid all the wooden bows inside of the top. So this is white oak. And then also did the fabric on the convertible top and the seats. And then they took it to the AACA meet at Biltmore Estate in '65 and showed it along with the 1928 Chandler sedan in our collection.
Could you imagine if cars today had real wood in them?
That would be pretty nice. You don't see wood much anymore.
Yeah.
This is also has a real gas gauge, speedometer, cigar lighter.
Look at that.
Really nice, modern car in comparison to like a Model T, which was still a little 4-cylinder with 35 horsepower, 2-speed planetary transmission. So really neat car. This is probably my favorite car in the collection that I've liked since I was a little kid.
It's perfect because it's front and center.
That's
then
right.
We got this MG over here. Tell me off camera that I found this surprising, but back in the day, these old British cars used to be quite popular around here, right?
That's right. Yeah. So this is a 1950 MG TD, and this one is a very early production run.
Okay.
So typically these would not have had the solid steel wheels. They would have been ventilated. But on the earlier production era, these had a solid steel wheel.
So these are still stock, is what
These
you're
are
saying.
still stock.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Now the car was originally red and was repainted British racing green at some point. And somebody has also added a little Sears radio in the glove box.
Okay.
But we believe, so this car is here. Harry was an MG and Austin Healey dealer starting in the late 50s. And we had a lot of foreign automobile dealers here in Asheville. So we had like Morris, MG, Austin Healey, Triumph, Land Rover was pretty big out a little bit further from here. And there was an event called the Chimney Rock Hill Climb that a lot of these cars participated in. And you would see early BMW, Porsche, Austin Healey, Seata, many brands. And we were talking a little bit about the McCormick Field Speedway here in Asheville, where they raced NASCAR in McCormick Field Baseball Stadium, but also the SCCA hosted what they called a Gymkhana, which was like a time trial event with these foreign sports cars. And one of their first events happened to coincide with the filming of the movie Thunder Road with Robert Mitchum. And he was an honorary judge of these sports cars. So Harry wanted to get in on that. So in addition to selling Pontiac and Cadillac, everybody, we always call it Harry's Cadillac. He had MG and Austin Healey at British Leyland, the British Leyland franchise, until probably the late 70s when they stopped importing vehicles here just with stricter safety and emissions, and when British Leyland was undergoing a lot of financial problems.
Right.
This is also a right-hand drive car, so it's
I was going to say,
really,
were most of the British cars that were sold here, were they all right-hand drive, or did they convert it to left-handers?
so their biggest market really was the U.S., so a lot of it was they came from the factory left-hand drive, but this one's so early in the production run that it is a right-hand drive model. So
I don't know about you, Heath, but I'm a big guy. I don't feel like I'd fit in this this super well.
It's a tight fit. I mean, I'm a moderately sized guy, and even for me, it's a little tight, like when I've sat in it. This is a car that runs really well, that we've just done a lot of work on in the last year or two with a tune-up and some refresh work on the cooling system. And when I had to sit in it to start it up, I'm like, this is a little more snug than I thought.
Yeah, I'm about 6'3", and there's no way I feel like if I get in, I'm not coming out. So,
yeah, it's really fun. I mean, these cars are super fun to drive, and to me, they feel really modern. Like, this is a wonderful car for the mountain roads that we have here, especially around Asheville.
Right.
You know, it's a really great car that you would enjoy driving.
Right. What about this Cadillac over here?
So this Cadillac is pretty special. This is a '57 Eldorado Brougham. And this was the top of the line Cadillac that you could buy in '57. And the Brougham is special because this was really more of a marketing exercise, I feel like, for GM to flex their engineering muscle. So this was a car that they only made 400 of in 1957.
Really?
And what kind of differentiates the Brougham from the rest of the Cadillac line is it has a stainless steel hardtop that is unique. So this was the only model that Cadillac made with a stainless steel hardtop. And then it has clamshell doors. This car had self-leveling air suspension. It has air conditioning, cruise control, AM/FM radio, power soft closed trunk. And then it even has, it came with this little accessory kit that included magnetic drinking cups, a leather diary, a gold pin, men and women's fragrances. And this car was one of the most expensive cars in '57. So this was almost $13,100 when most of the cars would have been $4,000 or $5,000 in that era. Like my '56 Chrysler 300 was a high-end vehicle, and it was only maybe $4,500 to $5,000 in '56. So this was a car that Harry sold brand new to a woman that lived here locally named Edith Bryant, and she lived in Biltmore Forest and was driven around by her chauffeur in this vehicle. And Harry did service on it for years, and after Mrs. Bryant died in the early '70s, he bought this car back and kept it in the dealer for a long time, and people would see Harry driving around town in it. But it's just so neat. I mean, it's a very rare car, number one, but two, to have the Asheville connection to it is really special. And this is a special color. This is called Lake Placid Blue. And this would have been one of the first years that General Motors introduced a metallic paint. So this does have a really brilliant metallic to it.
I don't know if you can see that at home, but I mean, it is a very, very bright and shiny blue on it.
It is very, yeah, this is probably one of the most favorite cars in the museum. This is the one that really draws everyone's attention.
Yeah.
And it does have the original interior. This has had a repaint in the early 90s. So this was repainted at Harry's Body Shop, just really due to some touch-up. It kind of needed some touch-up work. It was getting a little bit faded out.
Right.
But this car only has maybe, I think, about 58,000 miles on it. So it's basically a one-owner car and spent its entire life in Asheville. So Mrs. Bryant was very active at All Souls Episcopal Church in Biltmore Village and the French Broad Garden Club. So you would have seen this car in Biltmore Village originally and probably up at the Grove Park Inn for a lovely lunch. So it's never really been more than probably 10 miles away from the museum.
Wow.
And most of its life, and it entered the collection probably in the early 80s or so.
That is so cool, man.
So it's really neat. I mean, I like thinking about how somebody was using this car and how it was part of Asheville's built environment, you know, in its era. And I think, I mean, today, like we have people of all ages are blown away by this car, from very young to people that even remember them in the era. But I think, you know, back in the days before social media and the internet, like if you had just seen this car in a sea of, you know, Dodge, Plymouth, Ford, Chevrolet, this would have just been a knockout. I mean, you would have been like, what is that, you know, riding through town? So it's kind of hard to, you know, put yourself in that frame of mind, but it's really a special car.
And then we've got something that is super special to me because as a kid, when you grow up learning about the assembly line, you pretty much learn about this right here.
That's right. So this is probably one of our oldest cars. Most of our collection is pre-war, as Zach mentioned, so it's everything kind of from 1914 to 59. This is a 1914 Ford Model T, and these were very popular in Asheville. You saw a lot of Model Ts and Model As, mainly because they were durable, affordable, and reliable. And you needed something, especially as you were going far back in the mountains, that had good ground clearance and that was durable. I mean, this thing is probably more capable than most Jeep Wranglers with the ground clearance you have. This is about a 31.5-inch tall tire on a 23-inch rim. It's got a very stout little 35 horsepower inline 4-cylinder, 2-speed planetary transmission like a tractor. And then you have a 9-gallon gas tank that is located under the driver's seat.
Dang.
So this is a pretty special car. We've got two in our collection. One is on loan. We have a 1913, and these are what we would call brass era cars that have a brass radiator and a lot of brass treatment. The T switched later in the teens, early 20s to just a stamped steel radiator grill shell. But
yeah, you talk about the ground clearance. I mean, I think it's got more ground clearance than my pickup truck.
Yeah, I know. When I have a Model T as well, and when I'm in traffic, I'm like eye level or higher than most F-150s. So it's kind of fun.
Wow.
Kind of fun being it. This has kind of an early tilt steering wheel, which is pretty neat too. So if you're a bigger person, that enables you to kind of slip under the steering wheel. The Model T is not really a very big car. Like a lot of people kind of have a misapprehension that old cars are big. And you know, a lot of these early Fords and Chevrolets were made for kind of everyday people. So they're smaller, you know, kind of the economy cars of the day. And on the other side of the museum, these are really more the luxury cars. So they are going to be bigger in size.
I'm gonna note this. This is a brand I have never heard of.
Yeah.
Chandler. This is a Chandler sedan 1928. What is a Chandler?
So a Chandler, this is an early brand. So this time in American history, there were about 2,500 different car companies in America.
Dang.
And this was made in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio. It's got a straight 8 engine. This is actually a really good running car. And we did have a Chandler dealer here in Asheville. And they didn't really last very long. Chandler went pretty heavily into debt. I think they had about $500,000 in debt.
Didn't most car companies back then kind of were the same deal?
They did, yeah. They ended up kind of getting over their skis a little bit. And some of the signs of the Depression really came a little bit earlier. So there was kind of some minor economic crashes in the late 20s. And this was kind of a casualty of that. And Chandler was sold to Hupmobile. And was taken over in 1929 by Hupmobile. So they look kind of similar, but this was another car that was owned by the Lang family that was in the basement of the Landgren Hotel with the LaSalle.
And this unlike that Model T, I mean, it's very spacious in here.
That's right.
Very, very spacious.
Very spacious. have a lot longer wheelbase, so it's a
Yeah.
lot more stable, bigger engine.
Dang.
So yeah, well, you don't see many Chandlers around. This is a really special piece.
And then we've got a Packard back here. Now, for me, myself, Packard's actually super close to me just because it's actually from, they were built in Warren, Ohio, and that's where I got a lot of family here. So Packard is a super cool car that so glad to see you have one here.
This is a very special Packard. This is not an Asheville car, but it does
Really?
have an Asheville connection. So this one came from New Jersey, was originally owned close to Princeton, New Jersey. This is a 1940 Packard Coupe, and this was bought brand new by a guy named William Beard, who was a judge up there, and his son was a guy named Bob Beard, who worked for the Asheville Citizen-Times. And he sold a lot of advertising to Harry. And when Bob's father moved down to Asheville, he had two Packards. He had a 29 and this 1940. And he ended up deciding to keep the 29 Packard for himself. And Bob sold the 1940 Packard to Harry to put in the museum. So this entered our collection in 1968. It's relatively low miles. Mr. Beard was a judge and his law office was fairly close to his house. So he walked a lot and the car didn't really rack up a lot of miles. I think it has maybe close to 80,000 miles on it, but it's basically a one-owner car other than Harry. So it's a pretty special piece. This is a good running car as well. It's a straight 8. It's had we've done some tune-up work on it recently, but it always fires right up and idles very quietly. It's a straight 8, but it's very smooth, very torquey engine.
These Packards are super cool because I personally think that they're some of the cleanest looking cars, just with the styling lines on it and just very, very sleek looking cars. And
well, they were very popular in Asheville, like especially with people that loved luxury cars here, like Mr. Seeley, that was the manager at the Grove Park Inn we were talking about, that started Biltmore Industries, loved Packard, and a lot of presidents drove them as well. So Packard was a brand that was very popular in Asheville. Packard and Studebaker were some of the more popular and prolific automobile companies through Asheville, in addition to like Ford and Chevrolet.
And what about this this car right behind you? I don't think dark blue is a very common color in this era, was it?
Well, so General Motors was ahead of a lot of their peers in styling and color. So the vehicle that we talked about, the 27 LaSalle, was designed by a young car designer named Harley Earl, and that was his first project. And he established what was called the GM Color and Design Department.
So for those of you who don't know, Harley Earl is the namesake of the Daytona 500 trophy.
That's right.
He's basically designed that car up front, is what you're saying.
Yes, sir. Yes, so he was brought in. He was doing some car customization out in Hollywood, and it was the Fisher Body Company, the Fisher family, that brought him to General Motors, and he established the design department because there were no design departments. It was mostly engineers that were doing the styling. And he said, hey, if we have more colors and design options, we will sell more cars. And the head of General Motors at the time, Alfred Sloan, said, I agree. And they began to really outpace Ford, who was really the biggest manufacturer at that time, because they had more stylish and modern looking vehicles. So this is a 29 Chevrolet sedan, and this has an inline 6 in it. So this was overhead valve 6-cylinder when Ford still was using flathead on a lot of their vehicles. So they had a lot more horsepower, torque, and reliability.
Yeah, that is super cool to see the paint on this. That was the first thing I noticed, is it's got this navy blue paint. It's not black.
Absolutely.
And, do you know like what other colors that the old Chevys had besides?
So there was a lot of different. I mean, you had like gray, the dark blue, green, yellow, red. I mean, there was a lot of different two-tone options. This would be, a lot of people, one thing people get wrong about the Model T is that they think it only came in black. They actually started out with 5 colors.
Really?
As we're on the topic of color, they had red, gray, blue, yellow, and dark green. And then they switched to all black a little bit later in the 20s. And nobody has ever really pegged it down. But I think probably it was really for simplicity of manufacturing. There's rumors that black paint dried quicker. That's not true. There's rumors that black paint was cheaper. I think it was just one less thing to think about, right?
Right.
It's just, like when you think about some of these guys are like the eccentric geniuses. They wear the same clothes every day.
Yeah.
This would be kind of the same thing to me.
Well, and Henry Ford his name of the game was efficiency.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Efficiency and standardization.
Right.
Yeah. So speaking of Chevrolet, this is a 32 Chevrolet coupe. This is one you don't really see a whole lot of. This is an inline 6 as well, and this is one of my favorites because it's just a beautiful like black on black combination, which I think is really neat. I mean, you don't see many of the pre-war Chevrolets. There is a pretty big club that I'm a part of, the Vintage Chevrolet Club of America, VCCA. But this one is really clean. It's a very well preserved car. I don't believe that it's had a lot of restoration, if any, done to it, other than maybe some paint work. One of the things you'll notice on a lot of these cars is like a lot of them still have their original inspection stickers from North Carolina, which
no way.
Didn't start until 1928 that they kind of standardized that. But
so this 1945 or 1948, man.
Mm-hmm. And then on the backside, a lot of these cars, they don't have turn signals, so you're using hand signals,
right.
So that it actually, on the backside of the inspection sticker, it gives you a reminder on how to do the proper hand signals.
That is so
pretty
cool.
neat.
Dang.
So
Wow.
if you really want to get into some of the early stuff, this is a great place to see cars, or if you're restoring one, to kind of get an idea.
Yeah.
A couple other brands that are fairly uncommon that we have here. We have a 1917 Overland, as well as a Rio. So the Overland is an Asheville car. This is one that belonged to Bob Allen, who was kind of one of his top salesmen, and was very active in the Blue Ridge chapter of the Antique Automobile Club of America. And he had 4 different vehicles. He had an Overland, a beautiful Model A Phaeton, the 1913 T that is on display in the Grove Park Inn, and I think he also had a Senador Model T as well. But he lived on the Biltmore estate and was very good friends with the Vanderbilt family, and their family had been kind of some of the caretakers.
Yeah.
And this car was actually restored in what is now the winery. So this was restored and painted in the dairy barn on the Biltmore estate, and for many years was in the Hendersonville Apple Parade.
Oh, wow.
Apple Festival Parade.
Well, for being restored in a winery, they sure did a good job on it.
Yeah.
Man, that is super cool.
Now the Rio, so this, there's the band REO Speedwagon.
I was going to say, I'm a little disappointed this is not a Speedwagon.
So this is not the Speedwagon. The Speedwagon is a delivery truck. This is a T6 touring sedan that was sold new in Asheville, and this belonged to a guy named John Rumbo. And his father was the first mayor of a town called Montford, which is now a historic neighborhood. And he modified this car during World War II to fit, these are 38 Ford wheels on it, because he could not get tires during the war era to fit on a 20-inch rim.
Yeah.
And then he filled in the fender well so there wouldn't be so much space. So this is additional metal work to extend the fender down.
You would never know. It looks stock to me.
It's a good look to it.
Is it the same on the front fender too? Or?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Because it normally would be maybe about an inch or two over. But this is the car company that was built by Ransom Eli Olds, so that's what REO stands for. And that was after he was kicked out of Oldsmobile by his shareholders. So he started another company, and Rio.
And he's the guy who founded Oldsmobile, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
And this car has some kind of aftermarket options on it. So Mr. Rumbo was a really interesting guy. He owned a garage in downtown. He was also a secret agent.
Oh.
And was captured, I think, in Burma at some point and escaped. So that's why we think that the little flags are on the front.
I noticed that because this is an American car, but it has a British flag on it.
Yeah, he was a secret agent, I think, under the British government for a while. I have to look back at his obituary to be sure, but it has a cue ball with the letter R on it for Rumbo, and then some accessory gauges. This one was smashed out when his grandson put his feet up on the dashboard.
Oh, man.
And his grandson came in here one day to share some stories about the car with us, and then we have a picture of it when he took it down to Key West.
Dang.
So this is his little travel trailer, and you can see with the big solid disc wheels and probably a 20 or 23-inch wheel,
Right.
and the fenders being so much more open. But this car, he traded in at Harry's dealer, I think on a 49 GMC pickup truck, and then Harry kept it because he knew that Rio was very special.
Imagine going from this to a GMC pickup.
Yeah.
Wow. That is so cool. And we got also a 48 inspection sticker on this one too.
That's right, yeah.
Man.
So, yeah, probably right about the year he traded it in.
Yeah. So I hate to interrupt, but Heath here actually has one of the coolest tourist-related businesses that you're going to ever hear about. And I highly recommend, if you're in Asheville, take him up on it. It's called the Mountaineer Motor Tours. Heath, you want to tell me a little bit about your business?
Absolutely. So our business is Mountaineer Motor Tours, and we do a history tour of Asheville in a 1923 Ford Model T touring car.
That is
so when you're
cool.
out riding with me, I come in 1920s gear. We meet here at the car museum, and the tour is about an hour and 15 minutes, and it covers a couple historic neighborhoods as well as the entirety of downtown Asheville. And I get into the early history of the city and how it developed during the 20s. So everything is totally in period.
That is awesome. So where can people find information about that?
So our website is mountaineermotortours.com.
Yeah.
And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, Mountaineer Motor Tours, on each of those platforms as well.
I've followed his Instagram and he posts some really good content on there. So especially if you're interested in this era of automobiles, plus if you're interested in Asheville, definitely worth the follow. So we're going to jump back into the rest of our tour. But again, if you're in Asheville, check out Mountaineer Motor Tours.
This is a 28 Pontiac sedan.
Okay.
And again, this is a car you don't see a whole lot of. This is ironically for Harry being a Cadillac and Pontiac dealer. Now we have 3 Cadillacs in the collection, but only 1 Pontiac. And this actually has an inline 6 that's a fairly big engine and is a very torquey, it's a 3-speed manual H pattern. But this is a car, this is also a very good running car. And this one has been in the collection for a long time. So this I've seen in old pictures. This was kept in the showroom for a long time. Harry had a dealer in downtown Asheville on Haywood Street, across from where our Pack library is now. And this car is in the showroom. I've seen in some of the old photographs, as well as in a parade. It was following behind a beautiful 55 Pontiac Star Chief convertible.
Oh, wow.
So this is, I don't know that this has any Asheville history or not. We don't have a lot of information on it, unfortunately, like an old bill of sale.
Right.
At one point in the newspaper, the museum advertised someone had stolen the Chief Pontiac radiator cap off of the car, and they were trying to find it. So I don't know if this is the original one that somebody brought back or a reproduction, but this kind of one of those
Why would anyone want to steal that? I mean, come on now.
They probably, just kind of a neat little collectible item that they, sometimes stuff walks away like that. Luckily, we have not had that happen.
What about this big boat-looking thing right here?
So this is a 1940 Buick Century. This is a straight A. This is like a very low miles car. The story that I've been told on it was that this car was bought brand new by a gentleman here in Asheville who died rather suddenly after buying it, and his wife kept it but never drove it because it made her sad to drive it after he passed away, and it only has maybe 200 miles on it.
No way.
Well, I don't know if that, I mean, the engine looks like it has more miles on it, but the odometer doesn't reflect very many. So again, that's, there's a lot of stories and stuff. Some stuff I've been able to confirm, others just kind of fun local lore, but it's a nice running car as well. Yeah, it's a big car, at least compared to a lot of the cars in the collection here. It is a boat. A lot of these cars that have the 8-cylinder engine, they're much longer in the front because it's a straight 8, so the engine is physically longer. And this is technically a pre-war car too, so I mean it is especially big for the era, at least for me, who's not a super big expert in that era, but it does definitely look very big compared to the rest of them. So. Yeah, and this one's a 3-speed column shifted, so 3 on the tree, as is the Packard. Dang. So a lot of these cars, we have kind of a mix between 3 on the tree or on the floor. In the case of the Model T, it's a planetary, so you're just using a combination of clutch pedal and the gear lever. The parking brake is what controls that. But then the Cadillacs are automatic, the 50s Cadillacs. So this one is this is an Asheville car. This is a 55 Cadillac Series 60. This is one that Harry sold brand new. This is in a beautiful Cadillac green. This is an all original car and not very high miles. This was owned by Harry's secretary. Okay. So this was owned by a woman named Lila Raphael Ogden, and her daughter sold it to Harry after she died in '75. So you'll see the last inspection sticker is 75. And even under the hood, it still has her little tag. So when you pull in for service, there would typically be a tag that would state the owner name so that they could pull it up in the database to perform service. And we have a lot of the original receipts on it. But so she drove it for like 25 years until her passing, and then Harry kept it in the collection. This is a really nice running car. This is a 365 cubic inch V8, 4-barrel carburetor, and then this is an automatic.
So when I think of Cadillac, I don't think of green.
Oh, okay. This is really one of their pretty popular colors in the
Really?
50s, and it's also a color they use on instruments. So I'm a drummer,
Okay.
and there's a pretty famous color on Gretsch drums that is called Cadillac green, and Fender guitars also has a color called Cadillac green. There's this same like very dark metallic.
I guess that shows you how young I am.
Exactly.
Dang.
But yeah, this is a really cool car. This is one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
And this has a pretty neat feature, as does the Eldorado, which is called the Autronic Eye, which is this little, looks like a little prism sticking up from the dashboard. And so when you had an oncoming car, as soon as the headlight broke that prism, it would automatically dim your high beams.
Oh, that is
So
super
they
cool.
had auto dimming high beams even
Yeah.
in the 50s.
Dang.
Kind of an early feature, but Cadillac was really ahead of a lot of their peers with power windows, memory seats, auto dimming headlights, self-leveling air suspension. This is a coil spring car, but like in the case of the Brougham, is air suspension.
Dang, that is wild, incredible. Mm-hmm. And then behind you, I like this car because of just the history of the Dodge brothers. So for those of you y'all don't know, that they actually worked for Ford before they kind of had a similar situation to Mr. Olds over there, and they went and started their own company.
That's right. So this is a 25 Dodge touring car. And these were very popular here in Asheville. We had a local dealer called the Sawyer Motor Company that was the Dodge dealer here. It was a guy named Eugene Sawyer, and he actually brought the first automobile to Asheville in 1901, which was a Locomobile steam car.
Really?
That he drove. His brother Clarence had a grocery store in Pack Square called the Sawyer Grocery Company, and they used the Locomobile to promote Octagon soap, which was like a really popular product by Colgate-Palmolive, like very abrasive kind of lye soap. And then he became one of the first dealers selling Cadillacs, sold a number of vehicles to George Vanderbilt that were included some kind of very early brands called Chalmers and later Stevens Duryea. But his most prolific sales were Dodge, and he also sold a brand of trucks called Graham Brothers
Okay.
in the 20s that used a Dodge drivetrain. So one thing is I haven't been able to confirm is, with most of these cars being local, is this a Eugene Sawyer car? I don't know, but that would be pretty cool.
That is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. We do have this 59 Edsel. This is not an Asheville car. It doesn't really have any local history that I know of. I think this was a trade-in at Harry's dealer. This is a 59 Edsel Corsair. And Edsel is a really cool brand that's pretty misunderstood. So this was a product of Ford Motor Company, and they were trying to mimic what General Motors was doing with having tiered brands. So like if you think about General Motors, kind of the entry level would be Chevrolet, and then as you move up, like Pontiac, Oldsmobile, kind of in the middle, and then Cadillac at the top. And so they wanted to kind of mimic the same thing with like Ford at the bottom, Mercury in the middle, Edsel kind of in between the middle and the top, and then Lincoln and Continental at the top. And this was introduced right as a financial, there was kind of a financial crash in 1958. And the first year they introduced it, they also had a push button transmission that was called the Edsel Teletouch. Then it had inside of the center of the steering wheel where the horn, what looks like the horn push would be today, would have been the buttons for that push button transmission. The problem was that the solenoids to actuate the transmission shifting ran right under the transmission cooler lines, and oil would drip on them, and they would short out the solenoid, and then you would have some issues. So there was kind of some probably unfair projections of these cars being unreliable or poor quality, but there's nothing different in the drivetrain than any typical Ford. So this has like, a typical kind of FE V8 engine with a four-barrel motorcraft carburetor and standard Ford automatic. So those were very reliable. Some people don't really like the front grille on them, which I think kind of looks like the 1940 LaSalle. It's like what they call kind of a horseshoe, very vertical center of the grille. I personally like it. The car has a little bit of a, I think some people think there's a little bit of macabre kind of history. It's named after Edsel Ford, who was Henry Ford's son. And if you're a historian of Ford, it was a very tense relationship between father and son, kind of bordering on abusive, really, from Henry Ford. And Edsel died at a fairly young age, midway through World War II, due to stomach cancer, which a lot of people believe was caused by the stress of working with his father in a very difficult environment. So when the company came out, it was intended to have, Corsair was actually one of the names, a lot of the names that became model names at Edsel later were kind of pitched as the original name of the company, but they ultimately chose Edsel, which was kind of, I think, it didn't really work out marketing wise. Like a lot of people love to say, oh, it was, a terrible automobile or a marketing flop, but it kind of, the deck was stacked against it a little bit when it was introduced. So I think they're a good car. I mean, my grandfather had one and he really liked it a lot. That's kind of neither here nor there, but inherently they were not a bad car. Just sometimes people love to tell some of those old stories and don't really kind of know the whole context of the product. But
I think they're super cool cars. Even granted, we're looking at it 70 plus years later, but
right.
I think they're really cool. And I mean, the nose on it is definitely unique. But
it's unique.
I think just for just automotive history's sake, I would love more uniquenesses on cars like that. And,
right.
I could see how people would not necessarily appreciate this car back in the day, but I think now looking at it, it is probably one of the coolest cars of this era.
Right.
Even though it does have such a tarnished history. In fact, I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe there was some Edsels that raced NASCAR, which I could not believe you would race a boat like this.
For sure.
And then we've got what I think is probably my favorite thing that I've seen here. We've got this super cool fire truck.
Yes, this fire truck has a really special history here in Asheville. So this is a 1922 American LaFrance, and this is one that the city purchased brand new in November of 1922. During that decade, this was kind of Asheville's most explosive decade, I call it. The 1920s is when development was kind of out of control. This is when we totally redesigned our downtown Asheville city. And we were also modernizing our fire equipment. We didn't have a fire department until 1884, and it was volunteer until 1921. So it wasn't even a paid position. And this vehicle was really the best piece of firefighting equipment you could buy in 22. So this was $12,500 in 22, when, as we talked about, a Model T would have been like $500.
Jeez.
So this is a lot of money. And we bought 6 different LaFrance fire engines. A couple of them, we had like a big hook and ladder and some other vehicles that were purchased in that 20s era. To do all this development, we took out close to $333 billion in today's money of governmental bonds. And when the stock market crashed, we were totally broke. And so vehicles like this LaFrance, this stayed in service from 1922 until 1965. And this
65
until
man.
65, and they retired it and traded it back to American LaFrance for a new fire engine. And at that point, Harry Blumberg, our museum founder, bought it and started doing a restoration with it. And it was said that he kept it at the dealer for many years. In 1979, headed by Bob Allen, his entire service department did a frame-off restoration on this. And this painting was done by a gentleman who was Vietnamese named Ung Sung Kim. And he did a lot of the lettering and painting on it. And he had a brother that was named Kim as well. And they did a lot of the body work on it. Most of the bright work is original. So this truck, in addition to have a tank, it also had a chemical tank. This was a pumper truck, so this was meant to pump a lot of water. One thing that's kind of unique about it is it has this plaque back here on the rack that highlights our mayor in this era, who is Gallatin Roberts, as well as Alonzo Duckett, who was the fire chief, as well as some of the safety commissioners, Mr. Fitzpatrick, Mr. Sherrill, and the assistant fire chief at that time. And that was never removed. So it has a little bit of a dark history as well. Gallatin Roberts was our mayor and he realized that Asheville was in trouble financially after taking out all this debt, and he was somewhat misrepresenting the financial statements, cooking the books, if you will, and hoping that the market would catch up, and it did not. And when the market crashed, he was indicted for financial fraud and actually ended up committing suicide in a building in downtown Asheville.
Oh man.
And wrote a pretty long suicide note that was published in the paper. So it was a super dark time in our history. But just again, that's kind of the context behind that. I think it's amazing that no one ever removed that in a 45-year history of service. This truck was also on site. I mean, you got to think about in the time, we didn't have a lot of vehicles, but there was a terrible fire in 1948 at Highland Hall that was set by F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda Fitzgerald, who actually died here in Asheville in a fire at this was a mental institution called Highland Hall, and she was there for treatment for her bipolar disorder and lit the entire building on fire. And this truck actually was on site to put the fire out.
No way.
So we have a pretty detailed service record for this vehicle, as you would for any governmental vehicles. I was telling Zach when he came in, this truck, so this has an inline six called a T head, flathead 6 engine, and the cylinder head is actually shaped like a T. And I think it's right about 572 cubic inches.
Right.
So it's a very big engine. It takes 5 gallons of oil to fill this engine up. So we have a lot of service records of this at the local Esso station, getting its oil changed regularly.
5 gallons of oil.
And you got to think about, your standard truck takes 5 quarts of oil.
Yeah.
So 5 gallons of oil, totally different ball game. But this is one we've done a lot of work on recently. It received a new set of tires from Coker Tire. These are BF Goodrich Silvertowns. It's a 40 by 8 in the front and a 38 by 7, 40 by 8 in the back, 38 by 7 in the front. And at the time, the tires were really dry rotted. We actually had one tire fail. And so we did new tires and tubes, and we had to, this is the outer rim. You call the inner rim the felloe. So this is where the wood spokes and the steel rim are, and then the tire mounts on an outer rim that fits over that inner portion. And this outer rim had rotted through with rust, probably. I don't know if this truck spent some time sitting outside, but there seemed to have been a lot of moisture. So we had the wheels rebanded by a local machine shop, and then these were painted at Harry's Body Shop, and we took the toolbox off so they could scan it and color match. These were painted silver, which not have been original, so we had them color matched to the original factory color. The color that came up, this is actually a Hyundai red, was the color that they were able to match it with in the body shop. But a lot of the accessories on the truck, these are old hickory ladders, or white oak rather.
Are these original to the truck?
These are, as far as I know, original to the truck. Man. A lot of this equipment, the hoses probably not, because they're like an old cotton that would wear out over time. But it's a really special, I mean, it's a real hero for Asheville. I mean, this would have been on the first thing on the scene at any bad car accident or fire or whatever. And this truck, so this is mechanical brakes. So this is in an era before hydraulic brakes. So you have a big rod that connects to the shoe that goes over the brake drum. This truck only has rear brakes.
Oh my goodness.
So there are no brakes on the front axle, straight axle in the front. So you had to be pretty brave. There were a lot of firemen that lost their lives in accidents, if they were going too fast and took a corner, just fly right out. This truck actually was not originally equipped with a windshield. This is an American LaFrance windshield, but probably came off another truck and was added later in its life.
Wow.
So you got to think about, no matter what time of year, day or night, you would hop on this truck and drive as fast as you could to the emergency. You'd have no windshield. There would typically be 2 or 3 firefighters. There'd be 2 riding up front, and then maybe 1 guy hanging on the back, just depending on the call. But yeah, it was a tough gig. Now you will notice that there is a crank on the front. This truck would not have typically, I don't know who would have cranked this, because this would be incredibly hard to turn over. This did come with an electric start from the factory.
Okay.
So you would have an electric starter, which was pretty common.
So what was their reasoning behind the company including that?
Probably in case the battery was dead.
Okay.
I would think just to have redundancy, basically. Like this has 2 ignition coils on it and some other things, so you have a backup in case something goes bad. But this is the plaque that shows all the guys that did the work on it in '79 to restore it.
Dang.
This truck was driven a couple times in the Asheville Christmas Parade, which is pretty cool.
Right.
I think I have driven my Model T in the parade. I think it would be pretty nerve-wracking. You'd have to be pretty tough, thinking about not stalling it out on the hill or something like that, because the parade runs up a pretty steep hill, Biltmore Avenue in downtown Asheville. So anyways, this is one of my favorites too. This is one kids really like. It just has a ton of history, which I love. Sometimes the historical story is even more fascinating than the mechanical history, which is, really cool on this truck. But
it's kind of the same thing. Like, most of my content centers around racetracks, but like, it's the same thing with cars and racetracks. All of them have a story, and that's I think that's the most.
Story is.
I think it's even more fascinating, the stories behind them, rather than, the engineering and the design and the production are super cool, but like the story, I think, really is what encapsulates a car.
Well, and just kind of understanding how humans were interacting with this technology in the era. A lot of times I don't think we look at this so many times as a static object, but we don't think about somebody really drove this. And it was an important part of daily life. They didn't think twice about getting in it. It was a daily driver for them, which is pretty cool. But
dang,
this, I think a lot of people should be thankful to. Probably, it saved a lot of lives, and had a very long service life.
Dang, that is incredibly cool. What about this final car back here? This
this is a pretty neat. This is another car you don't see a lot either. This is a 1926 Cadillac 7-passenger sedan. So this has a couple of fold-out jump seats. This is a flathead V8. This is a 314 cubic inch V8 with a 3-speed.
So this is like third row before there was third row.
That's right. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I'll show you. We've got this has the suicide doors on it, and it has your fold-down blinds, but it has a couple of fold-up jump seats here, so you can accommodate 4 passengers in the back and probably another 1 or 2 on the front bench seat.
Yeah. Dang.
This is a car I don't have a ton of history on, so if anybody knows this, when we ran it through the Cadillac registry, if you have a Cadillac, they do an incredible job of documenting all the history of LaSalle and Cadillac. So this one, we have contacted their archives, and according to their sales ledger, this car was sold brand new in St. Louis, Missouri, to a woman that was named Louise Cella, and she did order it in this color combination. To me, it looks like it has been repainted at some point, but the interior does look to be original. And this is one that's been in the collection from a very early time. I haven't been able to trace down how Harry acquired this vehicle. There is like a bill of sale from Tennessee, but it doesn't state who the owner was. So
that's what I was going to say, is how in the world did it get from Missouri to North Carolina, especially back in the 20s,
Well, there was a lot of wealthy tourists that were traveling by automobile here. Asheville has some of the best developed roads really out of anywhere around the area, and a lot of that has to do with George Vanderbilt. He was really the first person to have paved roads in Buncombe County at the estate, but he was also a leader in what was called the Buncombe County Good Roads Association to have the roads leveled so they were more traversable as well as paved, and that started in 1913. There was a bond floated from the state for $700,000 to pave and grade the roads around here because they saw this as the future. Like 1913 is really where everything starts to change and we see cars become much more commonplace and affordable. But Asheville was a tourist destination for people that were seeking health treatments for tuberculosis or other respiratory ailments, as well as cooler temperature. Like we had a lot of people come up from the deep south. At that time, they advertised that our temperature didn't get above 70 in July, which I don't know how true that was, but a pretty good sales pitch. So there was a lot of wealthy tourists coming to the Grove Park Inn as well that were traveling by automobile. So it's very realistic that somebody could have driven a car like this from there. It would have, be a pretty long drive, but not impossible. So
dang,
this is
incredible.
It's a really beautiful car.
I didn't even notice too, it's got these sunshades on the back too. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's also pretty neat. The windshield you can roll up to allow some fresh air in. So there's a little crank here that you can open that up. And then once you get some of your other windows open, you really get a nice breeze.
Imagine if cars today had a roll-up windshield.
That would be a lot of fun. Like my Model A, you can tilt the windshield out and get a nice breeze going when you have the windows down. But Yeah, without air conditioning, people were thinking about airflow, so it didn't introduce a lot more fresh air than you get in cars today, which are relatively sealed off.
Dang, that is awesome. So I really want to thank Heath here. Heath's been awesome today. He's showing me this entire museum, the Estes-Winn car collection. Is that right?
Estes-Winn Antique Car Museum.
There we go. It opens in April.
Yep.
It's a seasonal museum, so definitely come check it out if you're in the Asheville area. And check out his business. Super cool. You don't see many businesses like that. Just an amazing tour here, so I really want to thank Heath. Thank you so very much for watching. We're going to dive back into more automotive history, racing history in the coming episodes. You're going to stay tuned for that. Until next time, we'll see you.